My oldest daughter is a brainiac. She attended an engineering magnet high school. She won our state's robotics championship. Those of you who are familiar with robotics and engineering in high school know what that is. She went on to be a national winner and actually got to work as an intern at one of NASA's research facilities one summer during her high school years. She is a brainiac, and I'm proud of her. One of my twin daughters was a level 10 gymnastics champion, state champion in the state of Georgia. Went on to the national championship. She's multi-medaled, an award-winning athlete. I'm extremely proud of her. Her twin sister has made her mark in the world as well. She's a wonderful artist. If you were to go to the Zebulon Cinema on Zebulon Road in Macon and go to the concession stand, there's a huge mural painted behind that concession stand. Yep, my daughter designed and painted that. Go to the news building in Macon, there's a mural on the side of the building there. My daughter designed and painted that. Talked to one of our former executive coordinators of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. There was a commissioned painting for him upon his retirement. Yep, my daughter painted that. Just last week, this is the climax of this moment. Just last week, my granddaughter Harper underwent a series of assessments and was found to be one of the 10 most intelligent 3-year-olds in the world population. I created and administered the tests. I'm sure you would agree they are tremendously credible, tremendously legitimate tools. Most of us who are parents and grandparents, we do not mind bragging on our children at all. Regardless of all the other stuff in their life we could talk about, we do not mind, with no shame at all, highlighting the best of our children. Even if otherwise we are not very braggadocio, we will still brag about our children. I feel the same way about the church. Now, I'm truly not a braggart by nature. I try to be a fairly genuine, quiet, humble person when it especially comes to things that have to do with God. I certainly like to see God as the source of all goodness in what we do, and proverbially give God the glory for what's done in the church and through the church. But today, I'm just going to be honest with you, I'm going to brag on the church this morning. First Baptist Greenville, that's what we're going to do for the next several minutes. Now, some might say that's wrong to brag or be proud or boast about what the church does, but since the Apostle Paul didn't seem to have a problem with it, I'm not going to have a problem with it. At the beginning of almost every letter that Paul writes to the church, he begins by bragging on that church. And so the church of Philippi, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, of how you have shown your love for each other and shown your love toward me. To the church at Ephesus and Ephesians, I rejoice to know that you know the riches of God and the power of God, and you know the hope that is yours in Christ, God's Son. To the Thessalonians, he said, I boast to other churches that you are a church that received the gospel and embraced the gospel and has shared the gospel now with the world. Paul had no problem bragging on the churches to which he ministered and with which he ministered. So I'm going to brag on us this morning. I want to look back over 4 years because I think there are several things in those 4 years or those 4 short chapters that could use some bragging about. First, I want to brag on us because we are really good at choosing. I know these are going to be weird things to brag about, but I'm going to brag about them anyway. We're good at choosing. In Acts chapter 1, our first text tonight, the believers gathered together and had to choose a new apostle to take Judas's place after Judas's death. And so it says that they narrowed it down to 2, Barsabbas and Matthias, and they just couldn't decide between the 2. And so what they did was cast lots. Now, casting lots is probably based on the old tradition of Urim and Thummim. The high priest in Judaism kept 2 stones in the breastplate of his robe. One was called Urim and one was called Thummim. Some people say that one was a black stone, one was a white stone. And whenever there was a decision that had to be made and the people could not arrive at a decision, they would consult the Urim and the Thummim. It was casting lots. If you pull out a black stone, the answer is yes. You pull out a white stone, the answer is no. Casting lots. It's kind of like flipping a coin today. You get to a place you can't decide, so you flip a coin, yes or no. I know it seems a little archaic, But that's the way they chose to do it. Matthias or Barsabas? White stone Matthias, black stone Barsabas, white stone. It's Matthias. God has chosen. They believed that the Spirit of God infused that process. The same way that we trust that the Spirit of God dwells in a search committee process. That's our Urim and Thummim. I know it feels a little archaic to some, and it is strange to elect a group of people and get them together so that they can work for months, maybe even years, to go out and very clandestinely and secretly search and tell everybody, oh, we're still looking, we're still looking, we're still looking, until there's a choice. I feel like God is in the choosing. I remember the first time I came to preach here, I walked into the narthex. I felt so extremely comfortable. I got back to Macon that evening. The next day I went to work. My business partner said, well, how did it go at Greenville yesterday? I said, it went too well. He said, what do you mean? I said, I felt way too comfortable there. He said, I'm in about 40 churches a year, and I felt way too comfortable there. I said, I'm not even going to go. They asked me if I wanted to go sit in the pastor's office and just think and reflect and pray before the sermon. I said, no. I don't want to go anywhere else in this building. I feel too comfortable here. At the same time, the search committee is thinking, well, you know, he's divorced. Is that going to be a deal breaker? And add to that the tattoo and the motorcycles and the poker. Can we really get past all of this? And somewhere like flipping a coin, you trust that God's Spirit is in the choosing. And it's not just about the choosing of the senior minister. We have chosen well, hired well for 4 years. Think through the people that have come to be a part of the working family of this church. And anytime you start naming people, you're going to leave someone out. I apologize. Shanda and Ryland, Sarah and Stacy, Mary Carol, Will, Dylan, Amy, Shelton. Shelton's still questionable, but 9 out of 10 is not bad. That's 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10. I'm just kidding, Shelton. You know we love you. It's not just hired staff. It's everybody who is being chosen to serve on committees and chair committees and teach classes. Just at our last diaconate, the meeting of the deacons, our chair of deacons said that over a month he had to call about 15 different people to serve in different capacities of the church, and not one person said no. It is this blessing of choosing, and I'd like to brag on our choosing. I'd also like to brag on our blending. In Acts chapter 2, it says that on the day of Pentecost, people from all the nations had gathered together, speaking a multitude of languages. You couldn't have had a gathering of people who were any more different from this gathering. They weren't all Jews, and they weren't all there to celebrate Pentecost. This was one of those events that people came from all over the world just to watch, like the lighting of the tree in Rockefeller Center. People from all over were there to watch this Pentecost celebration from all different faiths and all different languages. But when the Spirit fell on them like wind and fire, they all became one. They shared a language and shared a purpose and shared a celebration, even though they were all quite different. In fact, it was so amazing. It was so different. It was so weird for this group of people to get along and work together that the people watching said, they must be drunk. Welcome to First Baptist Greenville. I was invited to speak at a church some time ago. The church was struggling and in decline, and they asked me as a part of my time with them if I would look at their ministries and look at their mission and maybe offer a few words of critique and some suggestions for growth. And so I ask a question that I often ask church groups or ministers when they ask me these types of questions. I ask a very simple question. It's the first question I like to ask. When was the last time your church was touched by the Spirit of God? And they usually look at me and they go, what? I say, yeah. When was the last time you feel like your church was touched by the Spirit of God? When was the last time you didn't look normal? When was the last time you looked and acted a little strange to the people who were looking in? When was the last time someone from outside the church saw something happening in your walls so unique and so profound that the only result, the only reason for it could have been the touch and the presence of the Spirit of God? Because there's no programming I can give you to keep a church alive. It has to be that touch. Blending. You realize in the last 4 years we have hosted Ramadan, sponsored the Greenville Jewish Film Festival, hosted the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, welcomed multiple ethnicities into this pulpit, barbecued, marched, and partied with Springfield Baptist Church, embraced the Spirit of God in our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. While some have judged this blending and said this doesn't look normal, when I hear that, I just smile, because when the Spirit of God touches a people, it rarely looks normal. This blending is a gift of God. Choosing and blending, and there's no way you're going to get out of here without me talking about giving. Not as a request, but just to brag. In Acts chapter 2, we read what the early disciples gave to each other and what they gave to the world. To each other, and the people followed the teachings of the apostles. They broke bread together. They prayed together. They fellowshiped together. To the world, and everyone sold what they had and distributed it to those who had a need. I am amazed at the level of generosity that we have experienced in this place. Now, at our luncheon today, we'll talk about budgets, and we'll talk about Lula Wilden, and we'll talk about missions giving and all of those sorts of things. But you need to know that we are a church that has as a part of its faith fabric generosity, going far beyond the kinds of things that we record from week to week. Desmond Tutu's daughter and niece just happened into our worship service last January. And out of a fabric of generosity, 1,000 desks have been purchased for children in sub-Saharan Africa, and a team will be going to Africa next summer. Each year we ask you to fill 100 bags for school children here in this county for the beginning of school. Do you know that every year we have to buy more bags? Every year. On top of all of our tithes last year, the sanctuary was refurbished. Just because people looked around and said, we want to do this above and beyond what we're already doing. I was sitting on a tour bus in Israel 2 years ago when a tour guide named Claudia said, I would love for my 2 children to have the kind of camp experience that children have in the United States. And the person sitting behind us on the bench in the bus heard it and said, oh, well, let's bring Claudia and her children here and send them to university and let them have that kind of experience. I haven't asked her if I can share this, but I'm going to. Mary Carol Anderson's basement has been flooding for 4 years since she bought her home. There has been no remedy. Realtors and lawyers and engineers have not been able to give a remedy. And where remedies are given, it has been so expensive that the cost just made it out of reach. But if you were watching Facebook yesterday, there's a group of men, knowing that this rain was coming today, that just showed up at Mary Carol's house and literally engineered a drainage system for her yard, rented the equipment, dug it, put it in, because generosity is a part of the fabric of our faith. It's not something we beg about or talk about once a year just to meet a budget or meet a goal. It is the fabric of our faith. We don't give just to give. We don't give to say we made a budget or a goal. We give to meet needs. And so Acts chapter 2 ends with, and they sold what they had, and they gave it so that needs could be met in their world. We are a church that meets needs internally and externally. And because we know that God goes overboard in God's love and generosity toward us, it doesn't surprise me one bit that we tend to go overboard with our giving as a part of the fabric of our faith. That's a good thing. That's a holy thing. That is a sacred thing. So I don't mind bragging on you, on us this morning. I was recently introduced at a speaking engagement in Atlanta. I asked the host if I could have the introduction because I wanted to read it to you today. He introduced Jim Dant as the senior minister of First Baptist Greenville, one of the top 10 giving churches to the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, the top giving church to the Alliance of Baptists, in the top 10% of growing mainline churches in the United States, and one of the churches voted most awesome churches in the United States. And when he finished, I just smiled. Well, of course we are. I want God to get all the glory for what happens here. But I do not mind bragging on you. What God does among us is always God's gift and choice. But we have to choose every day, every week, to be part of what God is doing in the world. And I'm bragging on your choosing, and on your blending, and on your giving.